Economies of scale is the cost advantage that arises with increased output of a product. Economies of scale arise because of the inverse relationship between the quantity produced and per unit fixed cost. That is, the greater the quantity of a good produced, the lower the per unit fixed cost, because these costs are spread out over a larger number of goods. Economies of scale may also reduce variable costs per unit because of operational efficiencies and synergies. Now, I will glad to invite Frost and Sullivan, Director of Turkey, dear Melih Nalcıoğlu, for his speech.
Teşekkürler. I was not expecting so many people for this presentation because of the late time of the event, but I will try to do my best to give you some good introduction about the sharing economy, and I will take some 20-25 minutes of you. My name is Melih Nalcıoğlu. I am heading the Turkish operations of Kurumsal Sullivan. Let me open also my computer. Our company is a market research and consulting company established in 1961. Globally, we have around 2,000 consultants and working closely with the leading companies all around the world, and especially working in the automotive, healthcare, energy, and building environment sectors. As I said, automotive is one of our main focus area, and we are very closely following the change or trends in the automotive industry. Now we also call it as mobility. In our headquarters in Europe is at London, and every year we are making an event for the intelligent mobility, or we can also call it as a smart mobility. It is one of the top events on this area, and with the participation of leading OEMs, mobility providers. If you have any time, I would like to advise you to just check the website. So let me start also the presentation. First of all, I would like to give you the definition of the sharing economy. Everyone is understanding the words of the sharing and the economy, but exactly what is meaning for the sharing economy. There's a very good definition coming from the Alex Stephanie, who is the CEO of the Just Park, one of the leading sharing economy companies in the world. He's describing the sharing economy based on its two main characteristics. One is the creation value through the low utilized assets, and the second one, making them accessible online to the community. But in the meantime, this creates a kind of a lower ownership of the assets, because it's bringing a higher utilization for the current assets. On the bottom side, you are seeing the industry services offered by the sharing economy. But also, I just want to highlight that sharing economy is one of the megatrends, but it's also a disruptive megatrend. So when you see a kind of a boom in the one of the sectors that are related to sharing economy, you are seeing a big also impact on the existing sectors of the sharing economy. Let me give you some examples. Accommodation is one of them. In accommodation, as I said, there should be some unutilized assets. What are or underutilized assets? What are they? Are our homes, rooms, or summer houses? In mobility, we have examples like car sharing, parking, ride sharing, bike sharing. Again, for mobility, our low utilized assets are our cars, or even seats in our cars, or parking areas that are waiting as empty during the night or during the day. And there are also some other sectors like goods or funding are also a part of the sharing economy. we got the definition, and now let's try to see some market figures. As you see, it's quite big and getting bigger. This data is coming from the PwC, one of the great consultants and our great competitor actually. In their study in 2013, they described the value of the market size of the global market for the sharing economy. They estimated that it's around $15 billion. And with a CAGR of 30% annually, their expectation is that the market volume will be around more than $300 billion by 2025. It's quite interesting figure because the CAGR figure nowadays you don't see in many of the markets. Here you are seeing the key sectors under the sharing economy and their growth rates. Since our subject is automotive here, we are in a transport exhibition. Attention. Around 23%. We also have a kind of similar growth rate expectation as Frost and Sullivan that we are going to see in other details. And on the right side of the slide, you are seeing some key companies from the sharing economy. For accommodation, Airbnb is worth to mention because it's the largest one and is becoming the largest accommodation provider of the world. Its valuation, the value of the Airbnb is estimated as $25 billion. That is much more than the many established international hotel chains. It's same for the Uber, which is the, again, a sharing economy player in the automotive industry. Its market valuation is around $50 billion, like 4 times bigger than Fiat Group, and maybe 5 times bigger than Mitsubishi. Now, I would like to give you some information regarding the mobility and the changes in the vehicle ownership and to vehicle usage. The role and the perception of the cars are changing. We are experiencing this in our daily lives. With the increasing population, urbanization, connected lives, we are witnessing a new wave of products and services. Those products and services are improving the efficiency of our transportation network and actually making easier our life to go from point A to point B. This trend is commonly referred as a mobility. A mixture of products, services, partnerships, digital platforms. So, but mobility is offering a better infrastructure, better transportation options for us. In the past, when we see the transportation actually was almost equal to ownership of the private vehicles. And those private vehicles were providing us a free convenience status, and there was not actually a real alternative. But because of the impacts of the megatrends like urbanization, Generation Y, connectivity, the meaning of the transport or transportation is also changing for us. Now it's more equal to door-to-door mobility. So by this way, because of that one, we are seeing new business model like car sharing, carpooling, and also new vehicles or transport models like electric vehicles, high-speed rails, or BRT, bus rapid transport system, which is actually Metrobus in our language. Now, let's look at more onto car sharing. Here we are seeing the car sharing figures for Europe. It's very congested slide, lots of information there. Sorry. The car sharing market in Europe has around 3 million members and around 47,000 cars. In what we are seeing that in almost all countries, the car sharing is actively being used. Germany is the market leader with around 1.2, 1.3 million members and with 16,000 vehicles, and almost represents the 40-45% of the total car sharing market. Germany is followed by Italy and France, I believe. If we see the Turkey does not have very bad figures. It's quite good actually. We have around 18,000 members with 145 figures. And the other countries, like key countries except the ones in Europe, are Russia, Israel, and Lithuania. We have seen the car sharing figures, but now we are seeing the other sharing economy business models figures. Those figures are belonging us, Frost and Sullivan, our estimations for 2015 and 2025. This is the car sharing figures, ride sharing. Ride hailing actually means the taxi services. So the key message here, all the sharing economy is going very fast, and they are growing very fast. Car sharing, like those are the global numbers, has 8 million members and is going to increase to 36 members, from 111,000 cars to 400,000 cars. So as you see, it's increasing around 4 times in 10 years of period, but the revenues is being expected to increase by 6 times. The main reason one is, as you may remember, in the sharing economy we were using the low utilized assets, and by the experience we are expecting that this low utilized assets will becoming a asset which is highly utilized. For ride sharing, the numbers also are quite interesting. Revenue will be reaching the $10 billion, and for taxi is the largest one. Our estimation for 2025 that the market for the ride hailing, which is a taxi or Uber that we are seeing right now, will be around $350 billion. Apart from the core sharing economy business models, we have also smart parking. In some places is also a sample for the sharing economy. But we consider more this one as a smart economy member. Here we are seeing the concept of the integrated mobility. The key message here, at the center of the integrated mobility, we will be there as users. We will be managing our transportation needs, mobility needs, through our devices. It will be sometimes mobile phones or smart tablets, etc. And we will be at the center, and we will be the decision maker. And because of that one, most of the companies are becoming a part of integrated mobility. From OEMs to software platform providers, car rental companies, leasing companies, public transport operators, etc. On the right side, you are seeing some key companies in the sharing economy. For taxi services, Uber is the largest one, Hail and MyTaxi. We have also a very good example of the taxi services, B-Taxi in Turkey. I'm sure most of you are already using it. Bike sharing, we have Velip from France. For car sharing, Zipcar, Drino. In Turkey, we also have Drive.io, and so on. And for parking, it's also another important place. Just Park is the leading company. We have the BlaBlaCar as a leading company. As I mentioned at the beginning, the perception of the car is changing, and also we are seeing that a changing role of the public sector in mobility. And the change has already started. public companies or municipalities are experiencing new business models, and especially municipalities are supporting them. Like, for example, flexible scheduling, on-demand transit, parking supply, automated driving, bike-sharing tenders. I have seen like 3 or 4 cities in the exhibition area that they exhibit their bike-sharing services from Kocaeli, Kayseri, and Istanbul municipalities. Another trend that we highlighted already is car sharing. There are some municipalities already supporting the car sharing activities in their cities. Apart from the public sector, we are seeing the change in the vehicle manufacturers. The car manufacturer, like our understanding of the car manufacturers like OEMs, they were producing cars and they were selling the cars. But nowadays, they are also being a true partner or true player of the integrated mobility. So they are offering car sharing services, parking charging services, ride sharing services. They are offering finance, maintenance, or connecting services. In the next slide, we are going to see who is doing what. And actually, this is my last slide today. As you see, lots of OEMs are already in the sharing economy. They have some tools, or they have already involved. This CS means car sharing. So Daimler, BMW, or most of those companies are already offering the one-way car sharing services. Some of them even offering the two-way car sharing services. Also corporate car sharing or flexible leasing is also an interesting topic for most of the OEMs. Apart from that, we also see that ride sharing is a key for some companies like BMW. Parking at night or EV charging also is the interest of the BMW. Daimler is also in the taxi business. Another interesting thing is the German OEMs are more interested in being a part of the mobility services. This was actually my last slide, so thank you very much for your time and kind attention. Now I think it's turn for Alp, so thank you. You have, I think, a question. They told me that there will not be a question and answer section, but I will be there to reply your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melih Nalcıoğlu, for his speech. Now I will glad to invite Ericsson Vice President, dear Alp Uysal, for his speech.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Melih for that comprehensive analysis of the ride sharing and mobility, transportation sharing stage. When you look at the conference, we talk about 4 T's, and my speech will focus on the transformation and technology aspects of both sharing and mobility. So, as I'm already introduced, my name is Alp Uysal, and I'm responsible for the industry and society business, meaning all the business outside of the operator business that we have in the Middle East region. So, just to maybe pick up the pace a little bit, we'll show. I'll start off with a quick video. Oops, here we go. There we go. Okay. So, as Melih very well described what sharing economy is and what touched a little bit on mobility, what I'd like to focus on, maybe stepping back a few steps and discuss what's going on, what's been going on, and what we expect to be happening in the next few years. So I have 3 parts to my presentation. First, I will describe some trends, share with you some numbers. Then I will give examples of some of the early adopters of what we call the network society, some of the change makers in the network society. And then finally, I'll end up with some takeaways. What we've been experiencing in the last 30 years is actually a change that is much more greater and more impactful than the change we've seen in the industrial age. Of course, none of us were around in the industrial age to see it firsthand, but at least what we read and what we understand from the numbers and the development of the industries, we see something very fundamental here. So maybe one remnant of the industrial age was the telephone, right? The invention of the telephone. And when we look at the telephone, it took the telephone 100 years to reach 1 billion lines. It took us 100 years to reach 1 billion lines or connected places. Obviously, with the telephone, especially the mobile telephone, the number to reach 5 billion connections was 25 years. With the smartphone and the devices that we've started to see everywhere, what we're envisioning is that very soon, in a few years by 2020, we'll have 26 billion devices, and that'll be only 15 years to get there. And soon enough, in a few years after that, we're thinking of 50 billion devices. That's way more than the number of people on Earth, obviously. What we as Ericsson say is that everything that benefits from a connection will be connected. So the connection, the price of connectivity or will be so low that everything that benefits from a connection will be connected. So if we just look at where we are, you know, as also in Turkey, we're right now in 4.5G stage. And in 5 years or so, we are envisioning 11 times more data traffic. And we're envisioning a world where actually 90% of the population on Earth has mobile broadband. What we mean by mobile broadband is, you know, fast data connectivity everywhere, basically virtually everywhere on Earth. And as I said before, 26 billion devices. So way more connected environment than we have today. Well, you know, that's very telco specific. Maybe let's talk about what that means for more of our life, right? When we talk about 50 billion devices, we have to talk about things other than phones as well. So we're talking about 700 and soon, by 2019, 780 million smart meters. So these are the electricity, utility, gas meters that you have that are connected. Just a few years back, there were only 100 million of them globally. So you see the growth over there. Another interesting point, I think, over here, just, you know, we are right now living in a very urban world. If you may remember, in 1970, only 30% of the world population was living in urban centers. And the number right now is over 50%, and by 2050, that number will be 70%. And living in the urban environment, there's a serious cost of congestion, and we living in Istanbul very much know that. Well, if you look at what that cost of congestion is, it's 1% of gross domestic product, or in Europe, it's actually 130 billion euro every year. 130 billion euro is about 20% or 25% of Turkish economy, just to put it into perspective. Then I'll just mention a few more maybe interesting examples, since we talked about ride sharing a lot, maybe about connected cars. we made a survey and we asked, we're not as broad a market research company as Frost & Sullivan, of course, but when we asked users, 50% of people said that they would switch to a comparable brand, right? Okay, if they're driving a BMW, maybe they would switch to Mercedes-Benz or what have you, provided that they get connected car services. So this is obviously why a lot of car OEMs are looking into connected cars. Okay, so we're envisioning a much more connected world where we have devices completely pervasive, on our bodies, in our vehicles, everywhere. This is not news. Maybe more important is, like the municipality that's the sponsor of this conference, what does it mean in terms of the life? That, like I said, 70% of the world's population will live in cities by 2050. This will only make Istanbul municipality's congestion problem and other sort of problems much more difficult, as you know. And when you look at the citizens, what is it that they look for living in an urban environment like Istanbul? People are actually asking and demanding that they want sensors in public spaces to track and avoid traffic. I mean, those of us living in Istanbul, is there, I bet most of us, and I can ask, are using the İBB traffic or the Yandex or what have you, one of those applications daily, right? I mean, is there anyone who's not aware of them, who's sitting here right now? No, I bet no one is not. So, and what we're doing actually a project with a town in Spain where it's a weekend resort. And the one of the biggest problems there is finding public spaces on the weekends, parking spaces. And the citizens there are actually quite interested in knowing where available parking is. And it's very much in line with this, is that this is what citizens are demanding from the city. Another one, and I showed you the smart grids and the meters, people are actually quite concerned about their energy usage. Right? We pay hundreds of dollars every month for utilities. And what we want to know is really, could we save money? Could we be more economical? Could we do this in an easier way or a cheaper way? And lo and behold, 70% of people want to do that. And finally, drinking water quality. We have a special case in Istanbul, as you know, not many people drink water from the tap. But in a lot of places, and this is another application we as Ericsson have done, is that real-time monitoring of water quality and feeding that information to the citizens of a city. So what are we really talking about here is I'm just going to show a few slides. I showed a bunch of numbers already. What I'm talking about is, a proliferation of devices everywhere and all of these devices being connected, right? And then we talk about not just a few industries like retail, entertainment, but a lot, different types of industries, all being digitized and using these devices, and they're completely connected. Somehow, through service providers, through network service providers, they are connected to the network. And really what we need to start off by is, and maybe I can start tickling your brains, is this is actually the beginning of the shared economy, is that we are all sharing this network. The internet was the first time when we actually started sharing our networks, right? Up until the internet, the only time we shared our networks was when we exchanged fax information or when we made international calls. So before that, every country's network was separate, and every industry and every company had their own network. They did some automation, right? Or they did some digitalization, but they didn't share their data with anyone else. So maybe I can just, I think these are not news to anyone in this room, but another interesting bit is that people are quite interested in participating in the sharing economy, as was discussed in the slide before. So what I'm trying to say is that we used to have industries and companies in those industries who owned all the assets and the infrastructure of those industries. And when they were using automation or digitalization software products, they were very much using them for their own benefit for their own supply chains. And what we are seeing now is that they're moving to industries, what we say transformed industries, is that all of those, they're opening up their supply chains, they're opening up their physical infrastructure to other players, to their customers especially, so that to becoming more open and both digitalized and mobilized players. So why is this happening? There are fundamental reasons why this is happening. It's not just happening because Google and Facebook are very successful or what have you. It's happening because every company realizes that they need to consider their role and that they need to adapt in order to survive in the future. Each company, authority, and industry will have its own journey and will have their own starting point and, of course, their own destination. But when you look here, some of the drivers are obviously efficiency, but this is not efficiency in the traditional, mass manufacturing or that kind of scale. Obviously, globalization had its own efficiency drivers, but here we're talking about efficiency in terms of being more flexible, being more adapted to customer needs. Sustainability and regulations are sure driving this change, right? Because we have to be more carbon efficient, we have to be more careful about the way we are building, we're actually using the resources. And customer intimacy is obviously at the center of this. A lot of car manufacturers are very interested in connected vehicles. They're interested in connected vehicles mainly because if you think about a car manufacturer, they really don't have that much of a customer intimacy. They sell their products to a dealer, right, or to a country representative, and then that company actually sells it to the end user. And that's pretty much the only interface that the car manufacturer has with that customer. If they're lucky, they might get that customer come back to their service center maybe every year or so. But with a connected vehicle, the car manufacturer, so Fiat, let's say, or Renault, they're in constant contact with their end user, which is the driver. And then innovation and collaboration, I'll just mention something which was also kind of hinted in the slides before, which is we're beginning to see it in Istanbul as well. We see innovation through collaboration a lot across industries, across different entities. For example, in the area of sustainable transportation, we have a customer and we're working with them, a company in Sweden called Ubigo. And what they're doing is, what we're working with them is that we're merging all different types of public transport so that, Ubigo is your one-stop shop for mobility as a service. So as you, as a user, really don't care how you get from point A to point B. And in that process, you might be changing different vehicles or using different modes of transportation. Public transport, car rental, taxi, bike rental. So Ubigo is taking all these different agencies under its umbrella and really offering the most efficient and sustainable transportation to the end user. And global scale. Obviously, we talked about, the presenter also talked about scale economies, but whatever we do in the network society, global scale is very important. How are you going to have a car sharing service if you want to go from Germany to Spain for your vacation, let's say, and if you don't have global scale? Some And the tagline, obviously, you've heard things like this, slogans like this probably before, but the reason for this is that really there are indications that tomorrow is here. So, you know, there was an application called Pokemon Go that happened this summer, and you were logging into it via using Facebook. What happened is that people ended up spending more time in Pokemon Go, 34 minutes on average, than they actually used to stay on Facebook. And this was alarming to Facebook, believe it or not. In Sweden, we tested this using our technology, completely autonomous minibus that operates as a shuttle service between the metro station and the buildings. So there's no driver here. You just get into the minibus and it follows its route. And finally, in this area, we have to talk about Estonia. Estonia is very ambitious to be the most connected country in the world. And I would strongly recommend, of course, they have the benefit of being very small, but I would strongly recommend researching on Estonia and what they're doing with respect to smart grids, e-government, and all that. So what's the technology that's driving all this changes? Mobility, broadband, and cloud. And we have another video, a bunch of a plug right now. Yeah, there we go.
The age of digital industrialization is here. Business is digital, and digital is business. Operationalizing business transformation and innovation has become essential, and it requires a fundamental shift in the way IT and data center infrastructure are designed and operated. Together, Ericsson and Intel are accelerating the shift to cloud-ready network architectures based on software-defined infrastructures capable of handling IT workloads and network function virtualization. The Ericsson and Intel solutions help transition to an adaptable, intelligent hyperscale infrastructure, which is automated, governed, and secure. The introduction of software-defined infrastructure is essential, as enterprises in the future have to deliver 100 times the IT compared to today, but without increasing the budget. Mobile infrastructure and cloud. Application developers are re-engineering the world and want to deliver the best experience in any country. Customers want the best experience from the country they live in. Service providers can meet the needs of both and can deliver the guarantees the networked society requires. Announcing the world's first industrialized hyperscale infrastructure developed by Ericsson and Intel.
So I apologize for that plug, but I guess we shouldn't be so humble about it. So working with Intel and also our partner Cisco, we actually not only provide the mobility, but the broadband elements of what I talked about, but also the cloud and the whole data infrastructure for the cloud. So you've heard about 5G. This is where the mobility and the broadband of it comes from. 5G will start coming into our lives as early as 2018 in certain parts of the world. We expect that to be after 2020 in Turkey, but it will definitely be critical in the rollout of the network society as we described. As I said, so I talked a lot about the trends and the technology. I want to give a few examples of the change makers, so people, companies who are actually already using these and then basically bringing early examples of network society to life. I mentioned a lot about car manufacturers. So the Volvo is one that is definitely bringing infotainment and information from road authorities, cities and governments to the driver through the connected vehicle cloud. And I mentioned why car manufacturers are so interested in connecting to their end users through connected vehicles. Scania is another one. it's an we have an interesting project with the municipality of Varna, which is very close to here actually, in Bulgaria. There, they want to have a traffic management system where they give priority to public buses. So the way we do, obviously this is not just through the special lanes like we have with the Metrobus in Istanbul, but this is through the usage of traffic lights, giving priority in the system to public buses. And that's what we're working with them, as 220 buses in Varna we're trying to implement. And we have very many other metro and tunnel type of references. We're working with AT&T in terms of smart homes. You've heard about smart homes a lot. This is very important about, obviously, urban life. You know, smart energy, we talked about security and doors, water control, and all that. An interesting thing about, I don't want to give all Swedish examples, but unfortunately, they seem to be quite ahead in terms of thinking about this. Stockholm Seaport is 10,000 apartment and a 30,000 workspace project. Actually, it's an environment that's already in play. People are living there, and they have an ambition to be completely carbon-free, fossil-free by 2030. Maersk, they have 350 cargo ships of their own that are all connected. And what is the benefit of being connected? You can think of this big industrial machine. We have testimony, and Maersk tells it themselves, that if they have congestion, if they foresee congestion at a port, the captain actually can slow down the container ship so that they save on fuel rather than waiting at the port. And obviously, another interesting example of connectivity is all the containers on that ship are actually connected. So they are giving humidity, heat, and safety, the information, and basically shippers are able to track their containers. And these were just examples, like I said, and then there are other examples in financial services, in real estate, in public safety that I can talk about. But I hope I can, these were just examples. I hope I can, I've been able to make a few of the new, thinking when we were talking about the network society clear with you. First of all, we said anything that can be connected will be connected. And then any resource that can be shared will be shared. And this is enriched and abundant. So what this says is that the traditional boundaries, asset-based, infrastructure-based boundaries between companies and between industries will disappear. And then any reshaping idea that can be tried will try and trigger change. With all this connectivity, obviously there will be innovation and people will try new things. And the cost of trials will be very cheap. So why not give it a shot? So what this is as I'm trying to describe is that from product models, physical resources, and these type of relations, so a factory owning all the resources and the full product chain, we're moving to service models, virtualized resources, and symbiotic relations. Central to this is obviously participating in active users, through connectivity and smartphones, and we are enabling them. Things, connected and intelligent, we talked a lot about them, connected devices, data owned, shared, and open. Once again, the data that I have through the connected vehicle cloud, let's say, that I share with Volvo. What Volvo is doing is that they're actually sharing that music information, for example, whichever radio station that I'm listening to, with actually a media company. So the data is not just staying in my car or just within Volvo, it's being shared by others. And in the future, when we have vehicle-to-vehicle communication for semi-autonomous or completely autonomous driving, then that information will be shared across all sorts of transportation companies, right? The whole network, because that's how people will that's how people will know how to be able to stay on the road and have autonomous driving. And finally, platforms, economics, and scale. So, and to do this right, you know, ICT or information communication technology plays a big role, and we have to use ICT because it's also important to lower carbon emissions. Now, if you look at our technology, our ICT actually contributes only 2% to the global carbon emissions. So all our phones, all these data centers that you saw, their contribution to the global carbon emissions is 2%. But using these, right, through smart, using ICT properly, we can actually lower the rest of the industry's carbon emissions by 16.5%. What that is 10 gigatons, which is the equivalent of US and European emissions combined. So we have to do this is another claim, I guess. So this is my last slide. As I tried to tell you, both the confluence of computing, digitization and innovation by reuse and repackaging, which means have a lot to do with to enable sharing, combined with mobility, is the direction that we're heading to reach the network society. I hope I've been able to give you a bit of the future in terms of where these forces like mobility and sharing are taking us. Thank you very much. Tamam.
Thank you, our speakers, for their valuable ideas. Now, I will glad to invite İSBAK Smart City and Strategy Development Manager Fatih Kafalı to present their prize.
Teşekkür ederim. Teşekkürler, sağ olun.